Hello, thank you very much for joining us today. Can you tell us about yourself? What is your name? Where were you born? And where did you grow up?
Hi, so my name is Tzvetelina Dimitrova. I was born in Plovdiv, Bulgaria, and I grew up in the Seattle area of Washington.
I know you're getting your Ph.D. in physics at ASU. Can you tell me what sparked your interest in this field and what you plan to do as a career?
Yeah, so originally my dad studied physics when he was growing up in Bulgaria. And so when I was a really small child, he would read to me from a lot of science books. And that's what got me really interested and thinking about the natural world and trying to study just the natural world around me. I think specifically, I started getting interested in astronomy probably around the time I was 15. I had read some astronomy books, and I also ended up taking an astronomy course at my high school. And so I just really fell in love with it there. And then, from there was kind of the sort of natural run of things to keep studying it. I guess I never really saw myself doing anything else once I got really passionate about astronomy. I did my undergraduate degree at the University of Washington in Seattle, and I double majored in astronomy and physics. And while I was at the University of Washington, I did research in the massive stars group, and I studied red supergiants, specifically trying to identify like their populations. And that's what sort of got me interested in stellar populations and also high energy astrophysics as well.
Awesome,
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
Women in STEM. I'm also in STEM, so I love it when, yes. So why did your family decide to move to the United States from Bulgaria?
So from what I've heard, my parents moved to the United States when they were in their late 20s, and I was a really, really small baby. And so what I've heard from my dad was he was going off in search of better job opportunities than there were at the time in Bulgaria.
How have you been involved in the Bulgarian and general Balkan communities in America?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so in Seattle, I was really lucky that there was an institution called the Bulgarian Culture Center of Seattle. And so they put on lots of events, they put on annual concerts, and they also had a program for Bulgarian children in the Seattle area. And so every weekend for a few years when I was a teenager, my mom signed me up as part of the Bulgarian school there. And so we would go there and they would teach us to speak Bulgarian better. They also taught us how to write, and it was like my first time ever like experiencing like reading really, really long, like more complicated things in Bulgarian, and also writing like essay formats, whereas before it was very much like a little like kindergarten level. And so that made me feel a lot more empowered as a Bulgarian because I felt I was able to communicate better in Bulgarian, as well as maybe get a chance to read like some Bulgarian literature in the original version of the language. And that was also great because I got to meet other kids that were my age that were Bulgarian in the area as well. And they connected us with a lot of events that were going on. They have like a singing group and a dancing group. They would have events where lots of different local vendors would come and they would sell their like handmade Bulgarian crafts. And so that was also really, really great to see and to connect with those people. And other than that, there are a good amount of Bulgarians in Seattle, especially where the area that we grew up in. There were a lot of families that had also moved at the same time that we did. And so my parents became friends with them. And I was lucky because I got to grow up with other Bulgarian children and we would celebrate the holidays together. People would have like birthday parties. And so, that was really great growing up, getting to sort of experience that like Bulgarian cultural side of things with other kids my age.
Now that you've been in Arizona for a few years, can you compare the Bulgarian community in Seattle with the one in Phoenix?
Yeah, so in Phoenix, I've been struggling a little bit more to find a Bulgarian community because it's sort of like new territory for me. What I've really enjoyed doing is going to the Bulgarian Fest, which I was really happy to find out about. And that was really great, seeing all the performances there, getting a little taste of home from all the food. And I've also found out that they also have their own sort of singing and dancing groups. And so in the future, I would really, really love to maybe try and get involved in that. I haven't found like too much in terms of like other people except for you, which has been great. But
yeah, even though that was a really funny story
Mm-hmm.
too. Yeah, but actually, do you want to? Should we like explain?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, you can go ahead. Yeah, you can explain it.
Yeah, so my parents were visiting me in March of my first year, and I was showing them around campus, and we were just like walking through the parking lot, and then we like heard Bulgarian. And my parents are kind of just like waiting around. They're like, wait, like I hear Bulgarian. And they looked and they saw you and your dad. They're like, oh my gosh, they're totally speaking Bulgarian. They're totally Bulgarian. They wanted to go over and like say hi and introduce me. And I was like so shy. And I was like, no.
Oh my gosh.
Leave them alone.
I remember that. No, because literally like the chances of that are so like,
yeah.
Because like you said, like I feel like the Bulgarian community is a lot smaller.
It
here
is.
in comparison to like other places.
Yeah.
I've been to, like Chicago.
Chicago,
that's crazy,
exactly.
That's like a hot spot. That's like
right.
a melting pot for a lot of different cultures. But
right.
yeah, so that was really funny.
Yeah.
How do you sustain your Bulgarian culture in the United States and keep it alive in your daily life?
Yeah, I feel like for me, a lot of it has kind of been through cooking and also staying in touch as much as I can with the living relatives that I do have in Bulgaria. I found it really important to try and talk with them on the phone as much as I can, practicing the language when I'm doing so. I really love to ask them about their stories and like the history of our family in Bulgaria, so things like that don't get lost to time. I also love to talk to my grandma about recipes that she's able to pass down to me. And so a lot of it for me has been through trying to stay in touch as much as possible as I can with the roots that are in Bulgaria, as well as with cooking the traditional dishes. Like I love to make like banitsa and tikvanik. Those are my favorites. And then I try to share it with the people I'm around. So in terms of like every single time we have group events or like a potluck or our friends are celebrating some sort of holiday, I always try to make a Bulgarian dish and kind of like explain to people what it is when they ask, and sort of share that little slice of home with everyone. Yeah, I guess I also try and watch like Bulgarian movies, listen to music. I'd love to get more into like the literature side of things.
What are some major differences that you notice between Balkan and American cultures or customs in regards to hospitality, etiquette, outlooks on life, food?
Yeah, I would say, I feel like one thing I've noticed a lot is I feel like in America, it's a lot more of like a very like busy, fast kind of work culture. Like it's always like kind of just things move a lot faster than they seem to move in Bulgaria. Whereas like when I feel like I visit there, it feels like life kind of goes a lot slower. It's more of a culture of kind of stopping and to take the time and sort of like appreciating like what you're doing or like what's around you. Where I feel like in America, there's not as much of that practice of gratitude. It's a lot more of a sort of like, I would say, work-centered culture than it is in Bulgaria. In terms of etiquette and hospitality, I feel like Bulgarian hospitality is like so unmatched. Like you just love hosting people. You love having family over, friends over, and guests are treated really, really well. And it's like such a point of pride of how your guests are treated when you're in their home, or like how you can cook for them or provide for them and make them comfortable. I feel like the etiquette thing, I guess maybe something I've sort of noticed there is things tend to be like a little bit more like formal between strangers, I would say, in Bulgaria, whereas here things can feel like a little bit like more informal. But that could just be my experience because that's like the limit of like my Bulgarian language, and how I've learned it is maybe a little bit more formal speak when I'm talking to people there. And I feel like in terms of outlook on life, and this is biased just from my experience of like how my grandparents like see the world, it's a lot more of a positive outlook that I've gotten from people in Bulgaria, and a lot more of sort of like let it be and time will pass, and a lot more of like making peace with others and the world around you. Not to say that that doesn't happen in America, but I've just noticed that a little bit more in some of the philosophy I've heard from people in Bulgaria.
Do you speak Bulgarian? Do you find it an important mechanism to sustain and preserve your culture as a member of the Bulgarian diaspora in the United States? Yeah,
I do speak Bulgarian, and I find it a really, really important mechanism. Bulgarian was my first language, and I learned English just through grade school when I ended up moving here when I was little. But over time, you only end up speaking English mostly, and so a lot of that sort of ease with the language has been unfortunately lost. I used to speak Bulgarian at home when I was little with my parents, but the more time that we've spent here kind of turned into like a half Bulgarian, half English situation. And now it's like majority we speak English to each other. So I do find it really important when I'm making calls home to be able to practice Bulgarian. And it is really, really nice and comforting to get a chance to speak the language. I feel like it really felt like, it feels like almost like a barrier, because when I do go there, I feel like my Bulgarian is like good enough to the point where I can communicate with people, but there is always going to be that gap where I don't necessarily feel like I can like show my like true personality through the Bulgarian languages. So I just don't have the necessary like vocabulary yet to do so. Like you were saying, like a little bit more of like the formal speak is kind of the way that like I learned it. And so, it is a little bit of a barrier not knowing like sort of like the casual language, or when I'm with kids my age in Bulgaria, they're able to express themselves a lot more through like the jokes and sort of like the modern day language, whereas like some of the slang that I've learned is like super outdated. It's stuff that I've learned from when I was like a child that I've still hung on to. But yeah, definitely going to that Bulgarian school helped me a lot, because it really felt like I was kind of able to overcome a little bit of a barrier of communication with family back home and bridge that gap a little bit. Yeah.
How often do you go back?
So I used to go back every other year, and then sort of in high school, college, it turned into like, I used to go back every year, and then it's turned into a little bit of an every other year situation. And then unfortunately with COVID, I wasn't able to go back for a really long time. It ended up being about 5 years between when I was like a sophomore in college to my first couple years of grad school. But I was finally able to go back this past summer. And that was really, really wonderful. And now I'd really like to go back every single year, kind of starting that back up again, especially because like people there are getting old, and so you want to spend as much time as possible as you can with them. And so we usually go spend, when I was a kid, we'd spend the whole summer, like 2 months. But as you get older, it gets harder. So like a month, 3 weeks. I was really lucky this past summer. I was able to spend a good month and a half there. So I was really happy with that. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
How do you perceive the intersection of language and identity in your life? How do you navigate the dual identity of being both American and Bulgarian?
Yeah, it can be a little difficult sometimes. I read that you've sort of experienced the same emotions of feeling too American when you go to Bulgaria, but then feeling like too Bulgarian here. And so it is interesting kind of trying to navigate both of those, because there's like the human desire to like conform and to fit in, but then there's also like the really, really strong desire to preserve your culture and the traditions of your homeland, and knowing, yes, I was raised here and it's been so long, but your whole family is back there. Your entire family history is in a different country, and trying to recognize that it's so important to try and preserve that and sort of not let that culture be lost to like the immigration process. Almost like, trying to grow up American, but still trying to, remember who you are, try and practice like the traditions and customs as best as you can. But then, in Bulgaria, of course, it's so interesting going there. And it's like you feel Bulgarian in an American world here, but then you go there and you feel like American in like a Bulgarian world. And it's a really weird feeling going back to your home country where your whole family is, and almost feeling like a tourist at times, because you're experiencing new things or situations where like you can't really like communicate yourself as effectively as you would want to, or there's like customs or stories that like you don't know about, and so maybe you're not able to like get on as well with other people as you would if you knew the language fluently, and if you were you had grown up there and been sort of truly raised Bulgarian. And so and it does make me a little sad when I go there seeing kind of the lives of others and how they were able to experience the cultures and traditions their whole entire lives, whereas for me it's kind of just, it'll be like a month period, like every other year or so, that I get to experience that, whereas for them that's just how they were raised. But yeah.
I've seen on Instagram that you've spent some time over the summers in Bulgaria. Can you share a memorable experience or two about visiting the Balkans and spending time there? did you experience any specific emotions or feelings?
Yeah, one of the best times I've had in Bulgaria actually just happened recently when I went over the summer. I was able to attend one of my cousin's weddings there. And so that was the first family wedding that I've gone to. And that was so beautiful. I was so just overwhelmed with happiness. And it was so amazing to kind of see the traditions play out firsthand. Just getting to see like a traditional Bulgarian wedding and getting to experience like all these customs that I had like no idea about. I had never heard about these things. And so that was such a wonderful learning experience. And yeah, she got married in like this really beautiful traditional church there, just surrounded by so much family. Yeah, I was really, really happy to be able to be there and to experience that. And it really inspired me to want to maybe like recreate that in the future. I'd always thought about, obviously I would like, get married here because you always assume how things are going to go. But it kind of put the idea into my head. This is such a beautiful experience. And it would be so nice to have all this family. So yeah, I was really inspired to maybe try and have like a wedding one day in Bulgaria. Yeah, and some other really favorite memories. It's been a lot of just, my favorite things have been sort of experiencing like the natural setting there in Bulgaria. I've been to like the Belogradchik fortress. That was one of my favorite things ever. And it was so much fun just getting to see that history and trying to like, just kind of understanding how deep and how far back like the Bulgarian history goes. And then another one of my favorite things was honestly just my my grandpa's village on my mom's side. It's by these really, really beautiful mountains and fields. And when I was younger, my grandpa would sort of take us through the trails there. And there was like a beautiful river and there was a little trail going up into the mountains in the trees. And that's like, that whole area is like my favorite place in the world. And we would like play in the river there as children. And that's one of my fondest memories, I'd say, of my life, is getting to spend that time with my grandpa there, just out in nature and exploring. I do a lot of hiking now, and a lot of that also comes just from being really inspired by him in teaching me how to enjoy being out in nature and just sort of enjoying the world around you. And yeah.
What do you think about the Balkan diaspora and building peace in America?
Yeah, I have a lot of love for the Balkan diaspora here in the States. I definitely think building peace is a wonderful, wonderful goal. And I think a lot of that has to do with what like you guys are doing now, where you're trying to connect with other Balkan diaspora. And it's great that we're all, sharing our stories. And like you were saying, hearing what you're thinking, being put into words or being felt by someone else. It kind of helps with the sort of like isolation aspect of like no one else feels this way. It's really, really good to hear that other people do feel that way and sort of talk things like that through. And I think it's really important that while we build our lives in America, whether we decide to, stay here or move back there, to try and preserve the culture here in Bulgaria. Eventually time goes on and things get lost down the line, but I think it is important as long as we can to try and sort of just build the history and make sure that it's not forgotten. Yeah.
Based on your experiences, do you have any advice for us on preserving our cultures while living in America?
Telling others you're Bulgarian, especially like I know with like our last names or like a first name, it's always like the first sort of like talking point, conversation point, like, oh, like where is your name from? And I think that's really awesome because then you can like right away start that conversation and you can tell people about your family and where you're from and where Bulgaria is, because a lot of people, when you tell them, they've like never heard of it before.
It's Bolivia.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And so it's good to sort of like make that distinction and, make people more aware, like, hey, there's this small country, we exist, we're really awesome. But yeah, so it's always really great to be able to sort of be the first person to teach people about Bulgaria.